My sister Delilah smirked across the mahogany desk, twirling her new executive pen. I am firing half the old-timers next week. Their severance money becomes my performance bonus. She expected me to congratulate her ruthless business acumen. Instead, I sipped my tea calmly and smiled. Actually, you will not be firing anyone. Her face twisted in confusion. What do you mean? I set down my cup with deliberate precision. Because, by tomorrow morning, you will not have a company to run anymore. Before we dive into this wild family justice story, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button if you are ready for some serious family karma, and do not forget to subscribe, because this revenge story has more twists than a pretzel factory. Trust me, you will want to see how this sister's arrogance comes back to bite her. 6 months earlier, everything seemed perfect in the Westbrook family empire. Our father had built Westbrook Industries from a small manufacturing company into a multi-million-dollar operation over 30 years. When he passed away suddenly from a heart attack, the will reading became the most dramatic day of our lives. I am Marlo Westbrook, and I had always been the responsible daughter. While Delilah partied through college and bounced between European art galleries claiming to find herself, I earned my MBA and worked alongside Dad, learning every aspect of the business. I knew our employees personally, understood our suppliers, and had memorized our financial statements. The lawyer cleared his throat that gray October morning. To my eldest daughter, Delilah, I leave controlling interest in Westbrook Industries, along with the family estate. My stomach dropped. Delilah squealed with delight, already planning her corporate takeover. To my younger daughter, Marlo, I leave my personal investment portfolio and the downtown office building. Delilah immediately started treating me like hired help, rather than her sister and co-owner. She moved into Dad's executive office within hours, redecorating with expensive modern art and imported furniture. Meanwhile, she relegated me to a cramped corner office despite my years of experience and intimate knowledge of operations. The first red flag appeared during our monthly financial review. Delilah had hired her friend Marcus as the new chief financial officer despite his complete lack of manufacturing experience. His previous job was managing a boutique hotel in Miami. When I questioned this decision, Delilah waved me off dismissively. Marcus understands luxury and profit margins. That is exactly what this dusty old company needs. But Marcus's luxury understanding came with suspicious financial practices. I noticed irregular transfers between accounts, inflated consultant fees paid to companies I could not verify, and purchase orders for equipment we definitely did not need. When I brought these concerns to Delilah, she accused me of jealousy and threatened to have security escort me out. The breaking point came when I discovered the employee termination list. Marcus had compiled a spreadsheet targeting our most experienced workers, all coincidentally over 50 years old. These people had dedicated decades to our company, helping Dad build it from nothing. Jerry from maintenance had been there 28 years. Patricia in accounting had started as a teenager and worked her way up to department head. Samuel in production knew our manufacturing processes better than anyone. But here was the truly sickening part: their combined severance packages totaled exactly the amount Delilah had negotiated as her annual performance bonus. She planned to destroy lives to pad her bank account. I confronted her directly. These people are family. Dad would never approve of this heartless corporate restructuring. Delilah laughed coldly. Dad is dead, Marlo. I run this company now, and I will run it profitably. These old dinosaurs are holding us back from modernization. Fresh blood means fresh profits. Fresh blood, Patricia trained me on our accounting software. Jerry fixed the heating system during that blizzard when we could not afford contractors. Samuel invented 3 of our most successful product modifications. Sentimental nonsense, she snapped. Business is about numbers, not feelings. Marcus showed me how much money we waste on these overpaid relics. That evening, I stayed late reviewing financial records more carefully. What I discovered made my blood boil. Marcus had been systematically embezzling funds through fake vendor payments. Worse, Delilah was not just complicit, but actively participating. They had created shell companies to funnel money into personal accounts, disguising theft as legitimate business expenses. The fake consulting fees went to Meridian Strategic Solutions, which was registered to Marcus's girlfriend. The non-existent equipment purchases were processed through Advanced Manufacturing Partners, traced to an offshore account Delilah controlled. They had stolen over $200,000 in just 4 months, but their greed went deeper. They were manipulating expense reports to make the targeted employees appear unnecessarily costly. Jerry's maintenance budget included inflated numbers for repairs he never requested. Patricia's department showed software licenses for programs we did not use. Samuel's production costs reflected materials purchases that never happened. They were building a false narrative to justify the layoffs while covering their tracks for the embezzlement. The performance bonus was not just cruel. It was literally stolen money taken from the company and our loyal employees. I printed everything, creating multiple copies of bank statements, forged invoices, and email communications between Delilah and Marcus discussing their scheme. Their arrogance had made them careless with digital evidence. The final insult came during a staff meeting where Delilah announced the upcoming efficiency restructuring. She stood before our employees, many of whom had known her since she was a child, and spoke about dead weight and necessary sacrifices for company growth. I watched Patricia's face crumble when she realized she was being targeted. Jerry kept his dignity, but I saw his hands shake slightly. Samuel just nodded stoically, probably already planning how to break the news to his wife about losing their health insurance right before her surgery. That night, I made my decision. Delilah had chosen greed over family, both biological and chosen. She had betrayed Dad's legacy, stolen from the company, and planned to destroy innocent people's lives for personal profit. The sister I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone I could not recognize or respect. But she had made one crucial mistake in her corporate coup. She had underestimated me. While she focused on redecorating offices and planning terminations, I had been quietly documenting everything, building relationships, and preparing for war. The next morning, I requested that family meeting, knowing it would be the last conversation we would have as sisters before everything changed forever. I walked into Delilah's office carrying a leather portfolio that would destroy her world. She was admiring her new crystal paperweight, probably calculating how much of our employees' stolen money had paid for it. Her smugness made my stomach turn, but I kept my expression neutral. "Marlo, make this quick. Marcus and I have a lunch meeting with potential investors." She did not even look up from her computer screen, treating me like an annoying interruption rather than her sister and business partner. "Actually, this concerns Marcus directly. You might want to cancel that lunch meeting." I sat down across from her desk, placing my portfolio carefully in my lap. "In fact, you should probably cancel all your meetings for the foreseeable future." That got her attention. Delilah finally looked at me, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows raised in irritation. "What are you talking about? I do not have time for your dramatic mysteries today." "I am talking about Meridian Strategic Solutions Advanced Manufacturing Partners and approximately $200,000 in fraudulent transactions." I opened my portfolio and placed the first bank statement on her desk. "Would you like to explain these payments to companies that do not exist?" The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly, attempting to maintain her authoritative facade. "I have no idea what you are implying. Marcus handles our vendor relationships. If you have concerns about specific payments, take them up with accounting." "Patricia, in accounting, the same. Patricia, you are planning to fire next week to fund your bonus." I placed the termination list beside the bank statement. Interesting timing, considering she might have questions about these mysterious consulting fees. Delilah's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the papers. Her eyes scanned the documents, and I watched her realize the scope of evidence I had collected. "Where did you get these?" "You have no right to access confidential financial records without proper authorization." "I have every right as a part owner of this company to review our financial statements. Dad made sure of that in his will. Remember, the same will that gave you control but not complete ownership." I leaned back in my chair, enjoying her growing panic. Besides, these records show clearly fraudulent activity. Any responsible business owner would investigate discrepancies this obvious. Marcus chose that moment to stride into the office without knocking his usual arrogant confidence on full display. "Delilah, are you ready for lunch? I made reservations at that new rooftop place downtown." He stopped abruptly when he saw the papers scattered across her desk and my satisfied expression. "Marcus, how convenient. We were just discussing your innovative vendor management strategies." I pulled out another document from my portfolio, specifically your relationship with Meridian Strategic Solutions. Fascinating how their business address matches your girlfriend Sarah's apartment complex. Marcus's face went through several color changes, settling on an unattractive shade of gray. "I do not know what you think you have discovered, but corporate consulting arrangements are complex. You clearly do not understand advanced financial structures." "Advanced financial structures," I repeated slowly, savoring each word. "Is that what we are calling embezzlement now? Because the FBI has different terminology for stealing company funds through fake businesses." I was bluffing about FBI involvement, but their reactions told me everything I needed to know. Delilah slammed her hand on the desk, her composure finally cracking. "You vindictive little snake! You have always been jealous that Dad left me in charge. Now you are fabricating evidence to undermine my leadership." "Fabricating evidence?" I pulled out my phone and played an audio recording. Marcus's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. "The beauty of this system is that once we eliminate the old accounting staff, there will be nobody left who understands the previous financial tracking methods. We can rewrite history and make everything look legitimate retroactively." Marcus grabbed for my phone, but I held it out of reach. "There are multiple copies of this recording, along with copies of all financial documents stored in several secure locations. Attempting to destroy evidence would only add more charges to your growing legal problems." "You recorded us without consent. That is illegal." Delilah was practically screaming now, her carefully maintained executive image completely shattered. "Actually, state law permits recording conversations when there is reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. Corporate fraud definitely qualifies." I stood up, gathering my papers with deliberate calm. "But here is what truly amazes me about your scheme. You are not just stealing money. You are destroying people's lives to cover your tracks." I placed a photograph on her desk, showing Jerry from maintenance with his grandchildren at the company picnic. Jerry has been saving for his granddaughter's college tuition. Patricia is supporting her elderly mother's medical care. Samuel's wife needs surgery that their insurance covers only while he remains employed here. "Business is not a charity," Marcus interjected weakly, but his voice lacked conviction. "You are absolutely right. Business is not charity. It is also not a personal piggy bank for thieves." I placed the final document on Delilah's desk, a formal complaint ready to file with the district attorney's office. "You have 24 hours to resign your positions and arrange full restitution of stolen funds. If you refuse, this goes to law enforcement tomorrow morning." Delilah's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You would destroy your own sister over money. Dad would be ashamed of you." "Dad would be ashamed of you for betraying everything he built. He trusted you with his legacy, and you turned it into your personal theft operation." I headed toward the door, then paused. "Actually, I lied about the 24-hour deadline. I already filed the complaint this morning. The authorities should be here within the hour." Marcus ran toward the window as if considering escape from the third floor. Delilah sat frozen, staring at the evidence of her crime spread across her expensive desk. Neither of them spoke as I walked out of the office that would soon belong to someone else. In the hallway, I encountered Patricia carrying a box of personal items, apparently cleaning out her desk in preparation for termination. "Marlo, I just wanted to thank you for everything over the years. I know this restructuring is not your decision." I smiled and gently took the box from her hands. "Put your things back, Patricia. You are not going anywhere. In fact, I think you are about to get a promotion to Chief Financial Officer. We are going to need someone we trust in that position very soon. Through the conference room windows, I could see police cars pulling into the parking lot. Justice was about to be served, and it tasted even sweeter than I had imagined. The arrest was everything I had dreamed it would be. Two detectives walked into Westbrook Industries at exactly 2:30 that afternoon, their presence immediately drawing attention from employees throughout the building. I had positioned myself strategically in the lobby, pretending to review delivery schedules while actually wanting to witness every moment of Delilah's downfall. Detective Rodriguez, a stern woman in her 40s, approached the reception desk with professional authority. "We need to speak with Delilah Westbrook and Marcus Chen regarding financial irregularities reported at this company." The receptionist, sweet elderly Mrs. Henderson, who had worked here since I was in elementary school, looked confused and slightly frightened. "Should I call Miss Westbrook's office?" "That will not be necessary," I interjected, stepping forward with what I hoped appeared to be helpful concern rather than vindictive satisfaction. "I am Marlo Westbrook, part owner of the company. I can escort you to the executive offices." As we walked through the hallways, I noticed employees gathering in doorways and around workstations, whispering anxiously about the police presence. Jerry from maintenance caught my eye and gave me a questioning look. I nodded subtly, hoping he would understand that justice was finally coming for the people who had targeted him and his colleagues. The elevator ride to the third floor felt like the longest 90 seconds of my life. Detective Rodriguez reviewed her notes while her partner, Detective Walsh, observed the expensive artwork Delilah had installed throughout the executive wing. "Quite a bit of money invested in decorations for a company supposedly struggling with labor costs," he commented dryly. When we reached Delilah's office, I knocked firmly and entered without waiting for permission. She was on the phone, probably trying to reach her lawyer, while Marcus paced frantically behind her desk, like a caged animal. Both of them froze when they saw the detectives. "Delilah Westbrook and Marcus Chen, you are under arrest for embezzlement fraud and conspiracy to commit theft." Detective Rodriguez's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "You have the right to remain silent." Watching Delilah's hands being cuffed behind her back while she protested her innocence was surreal. This woman who had lorded her authority over me for months was now being read Miranda rights in front of our father's portrait hanging on the wall. Marcus tried to run, but barely made it to the elevator before Detective Walsh caught him. The immediate aftermath was chaotic but necessary. The board of directors called an emergency meeting for the following morning. Patricia, suddenly thrust into the CFO position, worked overtime with our external auditors to assess the full scope of financial damage. I found myself reluctantly stepping into the CEO role, a position I had never wanted, but now desperately needed to fill. But the real work began with rebuilding trust among our employees. I called an all-hands meeting the next day, standing before the same people Delilah had planned to terminate for her personal profit. "I know yesterday was shocking and confusing for everyone. You deserve to know the truth about what happened and what comes next." I took a deep breath, looking out at faces I had known for years. Delilah and Marcus were stealing from our company through fake businesses and fraudulent transactions. They planned to fire many of you to cover their tracks and fund personal bonuses from the stolen money. The room erupted in angry murmurs. Samuel from production stood up, his weathered hands clenched into fists. "Are you telling us they were going to destroy our lives to hide their crimes?" "Yes, that is exactly what I am telling you. But here is what I want you to know. Nobody is getting fired. Nobody is losing their health insurance. Nobody is sacrificing their future so criminals can profit from your hard work." Jerry raised his hand tentatively. "What does this mean for the company? Are we going to survive this scandal?" That question sparked the beginning of our alliance building. Instead of talking at my employees, I started listening to them. Patricia suggested implementing transparent financial reporting with monthly summaries available to all staff. Samuel recommended creating an employee advisory committee to prevent future executive overreach. Mrs. Henderson proposed establishing an anonymous reporting system for concerns about management decisions. Within weeks, our workforce transformed from suspicious and fearful to engaged and protective of the company they had helped build. People who had been planning retirement stayed longer to help with the transition. Employees referred qualified friends and family members for open positions. Our production efficiency actually improved because workers felt valued and heard rather than threatened. But the most crucial alliance formed unexpectedly. 3 months after the arrests, I received a call from Detective Rodriguez requesting a meeting at the district attorney's office. I assumed they needed additional testimony for the prosecution, but the reality was much more complex. Miss Westbrook, we have discovered that your sister and Marcus were part of a larger network of corporate fraud. They were not working alone. Detective Rodriguez placed a thick file on the conference table. We believe they were connected to an organized group that specializes in infiltrating family businesses and systematically looting assets. My blood ran cold. How many other companies were targeted? At least 7 that we have identified so far, possibly more. The pattern is always similar. Someone with financial credentials gains access to a family business, usually through a relationship with a family member, then implements increasingly sophisticated theft schemes while creating plausible explanations for declining profits. District Attorney Jennifer Maxwell, a sharp woman with steel gray hair, leaned forward intently. We need your help, Marlowe. Your documentation and evidence collection was exceptional, but more importantly, you understand how these schemes work from the inside. We want you to assist with investigating other victims and potentially testifying as an expert witness. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Marcus had not just randomly appeared in Delilah's life. He had been specifically recruited by a criminal network that researched vulnerable family businesses. They targeted companies where recent deaths or family conflicts created opportunities for manipulation. Delilah's grief over Dad's death and her inexperience with actual business operations made her the perfect mark. Working with law enforcement opened my eyes to the sophisticated nature of corporate fraud targeting family businesses. These criminals studied obituaries, monitored business journals for succession announcements, and cultivated relationships with grieving or overwhelmed family members. They offered expertise and emotional support while systematically stealing everything they could access. My role expanded beyond just recovering our stolen money. I began consulting with other victims, helping them understand how the fraud worked, and assisting with evidence collection. The Riverside family had lost their construction company to similar schemes. The Kowalski family farm was nearly bankrupted by fake equipment purchases and inflated consultant fees. The Morrison retail chain was stripped of inventory through non-existent distribution partners. Each case reinforced how crucial employee loyalty and institutional knowledge were for preventing these crimes. Companies that maintained strong relationships with long-term workers and transparent financial practices proved much more resistant to infiltration. The criminals specifically targeted businesses where family conflicts had created information silos and trust breakdowns. 6 months after Delilah's arrest, I found myself testifying before a congressional subcommittee examining financial crimes against family businesses. The work was exhausting but deeply satisfying. Every scheme we exposed and every perpetrator we caught meant other families would avoid the devastation we had experienced. But perhaps the most meaningful alliance was the relationship that developed with other victim families. We formed an informal support network sharing resources for legal proceedings, business recovery strategies, and emotional healing. The Riverside family helped us find trustworthy construction contractors for facility repairs. We connected the Kowalskis with reliable agricultural equipment suppliers. The Morrisons shared retail management strategies that helped us diversify our revenue streams. These relationships taught me something Dad had always emphasized, but I had never fully appreciated. Business success depends on community and mutual support, not individual competition. The criminals who targeted us succeeded initially because they isolated us from our natural allies. our employees, our industry colleagues, and our community connections. As the criminal network investigation expanded, I realized we were building something powerful, a coalition of family businesses committed to protecting each other and sharing knowledge to prevent future victimization. What started as personal revenge had become a movement for corporate justice and business community solidarity. The real war was just beginning, and we finally had the army we needed to win it. 8 months into our crusade against corporate fraud networks, I thought we had built an unbreakable alliance. The congressional testimony had been successful, resulting in new legislation protecting family businesses from infiltration schemes. Our support network of victim families was thriving with regular communication and shared resources, strengthening everyone's recovery efforts. Then, Detective Rodriguez called with news that shattered my faith in everything we had accomplished. "Marlo, we need to meet immediately. There has been a significant development in the case, and it concerns someone you trust." Her voice carried an edge I had never heard before, a mixture of anger and disappointment that made my stomach clench with dread. We met at a coffee shop downtown, far from the courthouse and police station where we usually conducted business. Rodriguez looked exhausted, her usually impeccable appearance showing signs of stress and sleepless nights. She slid a manila envelope across the table with the kind of care reserved for handling explosives. "Before you open this, I want you to know that we have been investigating irregularities in the evidence chain for several weeks. Someone with access to our case files has been feeding information to the criminal network, allowing them to stay ahead of our investigations." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside were bank records, email communications, and surveillance photographs that told a devastating story. Patricia, our trusted CFO, and the woman I had promoted to replace Marcus, had been working with the criminals from the beginning. The betrayal was so complete and calculated that it took several minutes for my brain to process the evidence. Patricia had not been an innocent victim caught in Delilah's scheme. She had been a planted operative working for the fraud network for over 2 years before Dad's death. Her job was to gather intelligence about our financial systems, identify security vulnerabilities, and prepare the groundwork for Marcus's eventual infiltration. Patricia recommended Marcus to Delilah. I whispered, the pieces finally clicking into place. She made the introduction at that charity gala where they supposedly met by chance. "It gets worse," Rodriguez said grimly. "Patricia has been sabotaging our investigation from the inside. Every time we got close to exposing other network members, evidence mysteriously disappeared or witnesses suddenly became uncooperative. She has been reporting our progress directly to the organization's leadership." The surveillance photos showed Patricia meeting with known associates of the criminal network in parking garages and isolated restaurants. The bank records revealed payments to an offshore account linked to her name totaling over $50,000 in the past 6 months. The email communications used coded language, but the meaning was clear. She was providing detailed intelligence about our legal strategy, financial recovery efforts, and coalition-building activities. "How long have you known?" I asked, fighting back tears of rage and humiliation. "We started getting suspicious 3 weeks ago, when the Morrison family's case fell apart overnight. Key financial documents went missing from their files, and their star witness suddenly refused to testify. When we analyzed the pattern of compromised investigations, Patricia was the only person with access to information in all the affected cases. The full scope of her betrayal became clear as Rodriguez explained the investigation. Patricia had been manipulating our company's recovery process, ensuring that certain stolen assets were never recovered by directing searches away from accounts she knew contained our money. She had been feeding our legal strategy to defense attorneys, allowing them to prepare counter-arguments before we even filed motions. Most devastatingly, she had been sabotaging the congressional investigation by providing the criminal network with advanced knowledge of witness testimony and planned regulatory changes. They had been modifying their operations to stay ahead of new laws specifically designed to stop them. Every family business we thought we were helping protect has been compromised. I realized with growing horror. Patricia has been collecting intelligence about their vulnerabilities and passing it along to the network for future targeting. That is our fear. We believe at least 3 companies in your support coalition are now being actively infiltrated by network associates who are using information Patricia gathered from your meetings and communications. The betrayal felt more personal than anything Delilah had done. At least, my sister's crimes were motivated by greed and selfishness. I could understand even if I could not forgive them. But Patricia had looked me in the eye for months, accepting my trust and gratitude while systematically destroying everything we were trying to build. I remembered promoting her, praising her dedication at company meetings, and including her in sensitive strategic discussions about protecting other victim families. She had attended every coalition meeting, taking detailed notes that I assumed were for our benefit but were actually intelligence reports for the criminals we were fighting. "Where is she now?" I asked, surprised by the cold fury in my own voice. "That is the problem. Patricia disappeared 2 days ago right after we started surveillance. Her apartment is cleaned out, her bank accounts are empty, and her phone has been disconnected. We believe the network extracted her once they realized we were closing in." The implications were staggering. Not only had we lost our most trusted ally, but she had taken with her detailed knowledge of our operations' legal strategies and coalition member vulnerabilities. Worse, her disappearance would alert the entire criminal network that law enforcement was closer to exposing their operations than they had realized. "They are going to accelerate their timeline," Rodriguez continued. "Every business currently being targeted is now in immediate danger. The network will move quickly to extract maximum assets before we can warn potential victims or strengthen legal protections." I sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of our situation. Everything we had built over the past 8 months was compromised. Our legislative victories meant nothing if the criminals could adapt faster than we could implement protections. Our support coalition was now a liability, with each member potentially exposing their business to additional targeting. But perhaps the most crushing realization was personal. I had trusted Patricia completely, sharing not just business information, but also emotional vulnerabilities about my relationship with Delilah, my grief over Dad's death, and my fears about being worthy of leadership. She had listened with apparent empathy while calculating how to use my pain against me. "What do we do now?" I asked, though I feared the answer. "We start over," Rodriguez said simply. "But this time we assume everyone is potentially compromised until proven otherwise. We build new evidence chains, establish new communication protocols, and identify allies through independent verification rather than assumption." As I drove home that evening, I realized Patricia's betrayal had taught me something crucial about the nature of trust and alliance. True loyalty cannot be bought or faked indefinitely. It emerges from shared values and mutual sacrifice over time. The criminal network's greatest weakness was that their relationships were purely transactional, built on payment and coercion rather than genuine commitment. We had been naive, but we were not defeated. The war was far from over, and now we understood the real rules of engagement. The morning after discovering Patricia's betrayal, I arrived at the office to find an unexpected visitor waiting in the lobby. Agent Sarah Chen from the Federal Bureau of Investigation stood with the kind of quiet confidence that immediately commanded respect. Unlike the local detectives I had been working with, she carried herself with the authority of someone accustomed to handling complex multi-jurisdictional criminal enterprises. "Miss Westbrook, I apologize for arriving unannounced, but recent developments require immediate action." She showed me her credentials with practiced efficiency. "I lead a federal task force investigating organized financial crimes against family businesses. Your case has become central to our understanding of how these networks operate." We moved to my office, where Agent Chen spread out materials that made Detective Rodriguez's files look preliminary by comparison. Charts showing criminal network connections across 12 states covered my conference table. Financial flow diagrams traced money movement through dozens of shell companies and offshore accounts. Surveillance photos captured meetings between known operatives and their handlers in cities from Seattle to Miami. Patricia Williams was not just feeding information to criminals, Agent Chin explained, pointing to a complex organizational chart. She was a mid-level coordinator in an operation that has systematically targeted over 40 family businesses in the past 5 years, stealing an estimated $12 million through infiltration schemes. The scope was breathtaking and terrifying. This was not just a few opportunistic criminals. It was a sophisticated organization with recruiting protocols, training programs, and advancement hierarchies. They studied business publications to identify vulnerable companies, researched family dynamics through social media and public records, and maintained detailed databases about successful infiltration techniques. Patricia's extraction was not an emergency response to law enforcement pressure, Agent Chin continued. It was a planned transition. She had completed her primary mission of intelligence gathering and was being promoted within the organization to train new operatives based on lessons learned from your case. My blood ran cold. They are using what happened to us as a training manual for future crimes. Essentially, yes. Your sister's psychological profile, your company's financial structure, and your family's grief response have all been analyzed and documented as a model for targeting similar situations. Patricia's detailed reports about your recovery efforts and coalition-building activities are being studied to develop countermeasures against victim cooperation. But Agent Chen had not come just to deliver devastating news. She placed a thick folder marked "Classified" on my desk, with the kind of ceremony reserved for game-changing revelations. However, Patricia made a crucial mistake in her final intelligence report. She documented several planned operations against current targets, including specific timelines, operative identities, and financial extraction methods. We intercepted this information before it could be properly encrypted and distributed within the network. The intelligence was incredibly detailed and immediately actionable. The criminal organization was planning coordinated strikes against 6 family businesses over the next 3 months, using refined versions of the techniques they had developed through studying our case. But now we knew exactly who was being targeted, which operatives were involved, and how they planned to execute their schemes. The Davidson automotive dealerships in Ohio are being infiltrated through their recently hired IT consultant, who is actually a network specialist in digital asset extraction. The Patel family's restaurant chain in Texas has unknowingly hired a catering manager who is preparing to embezzle through fake supplier relationships. The Williams Construction Company in Oregon, Agent Chen paused meaningfully, is being targeted by an operative who specifically studied Patricia's reports about your company's vulnerabilities. This was our opportunity for redemption and justice on a scale I had never imagined possible. Instead of reacting to crimes after they occurred, we could prevent them entirely while gathering evidence to dismantle the entire criminal organization. "What do you need from me?" I asked, already knowing the answer would change my life dramatically. "We want you to become the public face of our operation. Your credibility with victim families, your understanding of how these schemes work, and your relationship with legitimate law enforcement make you uniquely qualified to coordinate prevention efforts across multiple jurisdictions." The plan was ambitious and dangerous. I would work undercover with the FBI to contact targeted families, warn them about specific threats, and help them implement security measures to protect their businesses. Simultaneously, we would feed controlled information to suspected network operatives, allowing them to believe their operations were proceeding normally, while we gathered evidence about their methods and connections. "This means putting yourself at significant personal risk," Agent Chen warned. "The criminal organization now knows you are a threat to their operations. They have already attempted to neutralize you through Patricia's sabotage, and they will likely escalate to more direct methods if they realize the scope of your cooperation with federal law enforcement." The irony was not lost on me. After months of feeling like a victim of circumstances beyond my control, I was being offered the chance to take the fight directly to the criminals who had destroyed my family and threatened dozens of others. The scared, confused woman who had discovered her sister's betrayal was gone, replaced by someone who understood that justice required action, not just hope. Over the following weeks, Agent Chen and I developed an intricate operation spanning multiple states and involving coordination with local law enforcement agencies, financial regulatory bodies, and international authorities tracking offshore money movements. My role was to serve as the credible witness who could convince targeted families to cooperate with protective measures without revealing the full scope of federal investigation. The first test came with the Davidson family in Ohio. I flew to Cleveland and met with Robert Davidson, whose successful automotive dealership was being systematically infiltrated by criminals posing as technology consultants. The conversation was one of the most difficult of my life, explaining to a grieving widower that the people he trusted to modernize his late wife's business were actually preparing to steal everything she had built. But Robert's response reminded me why this work was essential. After reviewing the evidence we presented, he did not just agree to cooperate with our operation. He demanded to be actively involved in exposing the criminals. My wife spent 30 years building this business from nothing. I will not let some parasites destroy her legacy for their personal profit. Within 48 hours, we had documentation of attempted fraud, recorded conversations with network operatives, and financial evidence linking the Ohio operation to the larger criminal organization. More importantly, we had prevented another family from experiencing the devastation that mine had endured. The momentum was building, but I knew the most dangerous phase of our operation was just beginning. The criminals were about to discover that their former victims had become their most formidable opponents, armed with federal resources and an unshakable commitment to justice. 6 months after joining the federal task force, I stood in a packed federal courthouse, watching the final chapter of our family's nightmare unfold. The courtroom was filled with victim families from across the country. FBI agents, federal prosecutors, and reporters covering what had become the largest organized fraud prosecution in recent history. Delilah sat at the defendant's table, looking nothing like the confident executive who had once dismissed me as jealous and incompetent. Months in federal custody had stripped away her arrogance, leaving behind a woman who finally understood the scope of her crimes and their consequences. Marcus sat beside her, having already pleaded guilty in exchange for cooperation with the broader investigation. But the real victory was seeing Patricia being led into the courtroom in federal custody. Her extraction by the criminal network had failed when international authorities intercepted her in the Cayman Islands, attempting to access stolen funds from offshore accounts. The woman who had betrayed our trust and sabotaged our recovery efforts now faced decades in federal prison. Judge Martinez read the charges with the gravity they deserved: conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, racketeering, and participation in a criminal enterprise. The evidence presented over 3 weeks of testimony painted a picture of systematic criminality that had devastated families across 12 states and stolen over $15 million through sophisticated infiltration schemes. When my turn came to provide victim impact testimony, I looked directly at Delilah for the first time since her arrest. Your Honor, the defendants did not just steal money from our company. They betrayed the trust of employees who had dedicated their lives to building something meaningful. They destroyed relationships that took decades to develop. They turned grief into a weapon against vulnerable families. But I also spoke about transformation and justice. However, their crimes also revealed the strength that emerges when victims refuse to remain silent. The families in this courtroom have formed bonds that will last lifetimes, built on shared commitment to protecting others from experiencing what we endured. We have created something beautiful from their ugliness. The sentences were everything we had hoped for and more. Delilah received 12 years in federal prison with full restitution required before parole eligibility. Marcus got 8 years while Patricia faced 15 years as the ringleader of the local operation. The broader criminal network saw 43 convictions across multiple jurisdictions, effectively dismantling an organization that had operated with impunity for over a decade. But the personal victory went beyond criminal justice. Standing in that courtroom, surrounded by families who had become my chosen family, I realized that Dad's true legacy was not the company he built, but the values he instilled about community loyalty and protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The business transformation was remarkable. With stolen assets recovered and criminal interference eliminated, Westbrook Industries not only survived, but thrived. We implemented employee ownership programs, transparent financial reporting, and community investment initiatives that Dad would have loved. Jerry from maintenance became our facilities manager, bringing 3 decades of institutional knowledge to strategic planning. Mrs. Henderson trained her replacement, but stayed on as our community liaison, connecting us with local charities and civic organizations. Most importantly, we created the Westbrook Foundation for Family Business Protection, providing resources and support for companies facing potential infiltration by criminal networks. The foundation offers free security assessments, legal consultation, and emergency assistance for families dealing with suspected fraud. We partnered with the FBI to develop training programs helping family businesses recognize and prevent sophisticated criminal schemes. The Coalition of Victim Families evolved into a national organization advocating for stronger protections and supporting recovery efforts. The Davidsons expanded their automotive business into 3 states, using lessons from their near miss with criminals to build more resilient operations. The Patel family not only saved their restaurant chain, but opened a culinary school focused on family business sustainability. The Morrison retail chain became a model for employee-owned cooperative businesses. Perhaps, most meaningfully, I found love in the most unexpected place. Agent Sarah Chen and I began dating 6 months after the trials concluded, bonding over our shared commitment to justice and our understanding of how trust must be earned through consistent action rather than words. She left the FBI to join our foundation as security director, bringing federal expertise to our mission of protecting family businesses. The personal growth was as significant as the professional success. I learned that true strength comes not from avoiding betrayal, but from choosing trust carefully and responding to betrayal with purposeful action rather than withdrawal. Delilah's crimes taught me the difference between family by blood and family by choice, showing me that real loyalty must be demonstrated through sacrifice and commitment over time. On the 2nd anniversary of Dad's death, I stood in his old office, now converted into a conference room where employees participate in strategic planning decisions. His portrait still hangs on the wall, but it is surrounded by photos of all the families we have helped protect, the employees who have built successful careers with us, and the community organizations we support through foundation grants. I think about the scared, confused woman who discovered her sister's betrayal and barely knew how to respond. That version of myself could never have imagined standing before Congress to advocate for legislative changes, coordinating multi-state criminal investigations, or building an organization that has prevented dozens of families from experiencing the devastation we endured. The journey taught me that justice is not something that happens to us. It is something we create through courage, persistence, and refusal to let criminals succeed without consequences. Every family we protect, every criminal we expose, and every community we strengthen proves that victims can become victors when they choose action over acceptance. But this story is bigger than just our family's experience with betrayal and recovery. It represents something universal about the power of choosing justice over revenge, community over isolation, and growth over bitterness. The criminals who targeted us believed that families would remain isolated, ashamed, and afraid. They were wrong. Now I want to hear from you. Have you experienced betrayal by someone you trusted completely? How do you rebuild after discovering that someone close to you was working against your best interests? What does justice look like when the legal system cannot fully address the personal damage caused by family betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments below because stories like these remind us that we are not alone in facing these challenges. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more about how ordinary people find extraordinary strength in the face of devastating betrayal. Share this with anyone who needs to remember that victims have power when they choose to use it. Thank you for listening to my family's journey from betrayal to justice. Remember that trust is precious. Loyalty must be earned, and sometimes the family we choose becomes stronger than the family we inherit. Until next time, keep fighting for what is right, even when it costs everything you thought you wanted.